people at the United Nations were reading stuff that I had written and talking about me. And unfortunately, having to write out community standards felt like a 14-year-old boy, which I still find really funny. That's like my icebreaker now. Like, you might have done amazing things, but I made the UN say come repeatedly.
Hi, I'm Aaron Anderson, and you're listening to the Reinvention podcast. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Tara Cortland.
Hi.
And we are talking with Morgan Barbour, who is a circus artist, director, writer, model, actor, and an activist.
That is correct. And exhausted.
All kinds of stuff. Thank you so much for talking to us. I mostly wanted to talk to you because you have many, many weird jobs. Last time I saw you came from Virginia, and then you moved to Europe.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
It's a great question. So Caroline and I, who also went to VCU, we wrote the show called By the By that was this very, in hindsight, very post-drama school, all in black, spoken word extravaganza, I suppose you could call it. And we pitched it to this festival in Dublin called the International Dublin Gay Theatre Festival. It's the biggest gay theatre festival in the world. And we got accepted. And not only did we get accepted, we found out we were the first play to ever focus on bisexual issues as the forefront of the narrative in the history of that festival, which is brilliant and a bit problematic when you think of it, because they were on, I think, their 13th year at that point. But we packed up and we went and did this very weird kind of magical realism spoken word piece about bisexuality. And then we all decided to stay. So we had our visas and we just continued to live in Dublin. And it was quite like the smash of reality when we got there, because we were booked in on this festival and then we were able to tour the show. So we had money coming in. We were straight out of drama school on an international tour, essentially, not realizing how ridiculously lucky we were. And then we closed the show and none of us got any work for a year. So we were in Dublin. We all had these like really grating American accents. We did a couple of like random shows and some extra work here and there. If you Google me, my face is still, unfortunately, the face of a reality show in Dublin that I wasn't even on. I did a favor for a friend as being an extra because I would get a free meal on it, and got pulled in by the photographer. And now I'm somehow one of the faces of first dates in Dublin, despite never going on a date on that show. So it was a time.
And then you just stayed there. You just stayed and did you get into circus performing at that time?
So I'd done a little bit of circus before I left the States. I'd done a fair bit of juggling and a little bit of acrobatics when I was a kid. My 5th grade teacher was a retired clown, so he had kind of put me in there. And then while I was at VCU working with Drew Richardson, he's this brilliant clown. He goes by Drew the Dramatic Fool, and he was in grad school at the time and teaching my year's movement. He incorporated a lot of circus into our curriculum, and that kind of brought back the love of physical theater and circus for myself. And then getting back into Europe, circus was and is huge here. So I was able to get back into a bit of aerial and over in Ireland, and then heavy once I moved back to London. And then it just kind of took over. I was in grad school and completely changed what I wanted to write and research about once I got back into circus. It was just all encompassing, much to my academic advisor's sort of disarray. I went to a very prestigious drama school over there with the expectation that I would write about theater. And then I did very little writing about theater my entire time there.
Now, there's a history, because I read some of your writing. There's a history of muscly women in circles, in circuses, right?
And there is very much so.
And there's some interesting things about women's bodies and all that.
Yeah, of course, body positivity has been such a kind of new concept in our media, and we have been looking at women's bodies and trying to control the way women's bodies look since the beginning of time, essentially. But especially in circus, if you're doing aerial work, you get muscular. It's just a hazard of the job. Basically, you build up your body. And from time immemorial within circus, especially within flying trapeze, we have been trying to change the narrative of how women are able to do what they're able to do without actually acknowledging that they are athletes and that they have had to cultivate a physicality to do what they do. So critics would often describe female flyers back in the 1800s, early 1900s as being graceful, beautiful, lithe. They would never talk about their muscularity. And then their male counterparts performing these same tricks would be strong and daring and muscular. And so that language, especially in the last 10 years or so, we've been really trying to change it within the circus industry and within theater as well, because we're incorporating circus more and more into theater and into film. We have The Greatest Showman, which was a blockbuster hit, but we're not really seeing representative circus bodies still. And I get a lot of female students, both in my circus classes, and I've taught female actors as well who've gotten into circus, who have been criticized for getting bulky, for example, when in actuality, they're just developing delts and lats and muscles that are part of your body and are just kind of waking up because they're picking up their body weight and putting it down several hundred times in a session, and that will happen. Funnily enough.
I wouldn't know. It's not a problem I have. Is that how you got into modeling then?
No. So I had gotten into modeling. I started modeling I'd done a little bit when I was 15, 16, a little bit of commercial modeling. And then I started life modeling when I turned 18. So I worked with a couple of art studios in Richmond, Virginia, and used that to kind of pay my way through university and cover whatever scholarships didn't. And I found it really, really brilliant because when I got to VCU and was acting, I came from a very tiny town, had been on stage a little bit, but was very uncomfortable with my body, as a lot of 18-year-old girls are, and was kind of on the end of having some like eating disorder issues when I was in school, and I had been an athlete my entire time. I did judo nonstop as a teenager and had done a little bit of aerials. And so I was having this constant fight of feeling both too big and too small simultaneously. I have gone back and looked at my diary entries, and they're quite heartbreaking because I was a really scrawny kid, but I was a really muscular, scrawny kid. And so I have entries about how I was way too tiny, or I looked like a boy, or I was way too big, all within the span of a week. And obviously none of those are true. I was just, a 12-year-old girl. But modeling at 18, it was really empowering because I was often I'd get to look at drawings or photographs that people took of me, often in very little or no clothing. And it kind of forced me to look at my body in a way that I had never looked at it before. And then I started publishing it and pretty immediately put it under my real name because I never wanted any kind of controversy around my body with performance. And suddenly started getting predominantly other women writing me and being like, oh, wow, that's amazing. You look like I look, or you're so beautiful, or anything like that, which are comments I would have given myself. And then in the process of getting back into circus and seeing my body change pretty significantly, because at the time I revisited it, I was very, very tiny and not very strong. It was one of the few times in my life that I haven't felt very solid and strong. And so I did get to kind of watch my arms kind of get bigger, and I developed lats and got back muscles and all of these things. And I have thanks to modeling, I have this very physical history that I can then look back on and see those changes. But it's been pretty incredible. I both through my modeling and then just seeing women come into my classes now, I now have women, especially since the pandemic, it's been a really stark change, who come to me and they just say, I want to be strong. And it's a full stop. That's it. And it doesn't even really matter what that strength looks like. Like my flyer, my duo act, she's very petite. She's 4'5", 37 kilos, which I think is 90 pounds, roughly, very tiny. But she's, built like a brick house. She's so muscular and strong, but she's really petite. If you looked at her just in a hoodie and jeans, she doesn't look strong. So I think it's really important with modeling and with circus to realize that your body size doesn't really matter. It's very much how you're using that body, and strength comes in all different sizes, which is a really beautiful thing.
Body positivity is so hard for women because, like you said, you're supposed to be soft, but not fat, but not too like you're supposed to be small and petite, but also soft at the same time. So you can't have muscles, but you have to have muscles. But I like how you were talking about the mostly undressed pictures of yourself. In talking to women, I found that one of the things that helps with body positivity as much as anything else is just walking around your house naked all the time, just looking in the mirror, just getting used to the way your body looks all the time, getting used to the way it feels all the time. That getting used to it is as much as anything else.
Did you find anything like that in modeling? I mean, was there a period where you were just not comfortable with it?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I was very not uncomfortable in that I actively wanted to be there. So there was comfort in that, but I was very aware of being seen. And I was very aware of all of these kind of Western conservative Southern Christian ideals of no one should see your body like that. You're doing something wrong. You shouldn't be showing your body like this. But as time went on, I got more and more comfortable, and I started meeting other models who were also very comfortable. I find circus people, actors, entertainers in general tend to not really care about nudity, because if you're doing a quick change, your boobs are out and everyone's seeing them and it doesn't matter. You just have to like get the next thing on and run out and do your act. As I've gotten older, I started caring less and less, to the point now where like I feel like all of my friends have seen me naked in person because I'll just change.
Is the lack of clothing on a modeling shoot, is that also what led to some of your community activism and community standards?
Yeah, very much so. I have this really poignant memory when I was growing up. So my family overall wasn't very hung up on nudity. They're not very religious. So people weren't naked in my home, but the idea of someone being naked wasn't like shocking, for example. So I think that's why I kind of led to the idea of using my body as like an extra bit of my art, being quite comfortable. But I remember, I think I was like 9 or 10, super scrawny kid. And it was the first time I was told, I don't even think it was my mom. I think I was like off with a group of kids and we were going swimming. And I had always just, if I didn't have a bathing suit, I would always just like swim in my underwear, swim in shorts, because I was, flat chested and a kid. And a lot of little girls do that as well. And it was the first time, because I was starting to develop breasts, I was told that it was inappropriate for me to do that and that I had to cover my chest. And I have this really vivid memory of like staring at myself in the mirror and being really upset and like almost having a bit of body dysmorphia of just being like, I don't understand. Like, it's unfair that I'm growing breasts. It's unfair that I have to cover them. It's unfair that I'm, 9 years old, haven't even gone through puberty yet. And people are, at the time, I didn't realize it was being sexualized, but in hindsight, 100% sexualizing a child who just wants to go swimming, for God's sake. But it drives me up the wall completely that we view nudity as sexualized as it is, especially female nudity, especially breasts. And so when I started posting my things online, the idea that I had to censor my nipples was just baffling to me. I remember even at VCU being told by professors to be careful that I was, posting topless photos because like, what would people think? It would typecast me. It would put out the wrong message. And it was just like, but they're not sexual. Like, I'm not doing anything lurid in these photos. It's literally just my chest. And if my male colleague did that, he would be praised for putting up like an attractive headshot, for example. Whereas if you caught a glimpse of my nipple, I was doing something wrong. And so I very much rebelled against that and started being like, well, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to put my nipples everywhere then. But yeah, with community standards, because I've always been wanting to fight against algorithms and put my boobs everywhere, I've gotten in trouble with social media a lot. And so prior to the pandemic, I would, probably every 6 months get my account frozen or get told off by one of the social media platforms I was on, telling me I was being terrible, and I would just ignore it and it was fine. But then as I started getting more of a social media presence, I was getting more and more abuse on those platforms. So I would say 1 out of every 10 messages, it was lovely, would be a guy either just being really creepy or it would be a dick pic. Yeah. Nowadays, actually, I just send them through my agent, and I've told him that if he gets a dick pic, I'm really sorry, but he can deal with them. For a long time, I wouldn't even report them. I would just like write back, or I would like post screenshots up of them, kind of trying to public shame them. And had quite mixed reviews to that as well. Women who had gone through it were always like, yes, keep doing that. And I've had quite a few women tell me that my posting up screenshots encouraged them to do the same. I didn't start this movement, but myself, a lot of other models, a lot of other female activists I know, if you send me a dick pic and I can find your mom, I'm sending her a screenshot of your penis and being like, deal with your child. But then COVID hit, and everyone is home in lockdown, bored. So everyone's on the internet. And I saw a just almost comical spike in abuse. And I went to go report one that was really vile. It was just like, the guy sent me a dick pic. I was like, okay, I'm going to post it up. And then he was like, fuck you, bitch. I'm going to find you and kill you. And I was like,
holy shit.
You know what? I was like, I'm reporting you. And it's one of those things, like, you do begin to like separate and compartmentalize, because on the one hand, I know this dude is not going to find me and kill me. Like, I'm not afraid of that. But also the fact that they feel so liberated to say that is the bigger issue for me. And I reported it to Instagram, and I immediately got a response saying that due to COVID-19, they had cut down on the amount of people that were able to moderate, and it was now largely automated. If what I had reported wasn't at the highest ability to cause harm, they wouldn't deal with it.
Their reviewers were busy because also COVID-19, they didn't have enough reviewers. They were busy pulling down the picture of the statue that I posted in Paris that had nipples showing. That was
right.
They were busy doing that and didn't have time to deal with your guy.
I was just super annoyed. So I made an Instagram account that night called Community Standards, spelled CUM, mostly because I was exhausted and immature and found it really funny. So I made that, and then pretty instantaneously, like, I just started going through old screenshots I had, posting up like these really like kind of funny but objectively terrible things that mostly men had sent me. And then within a couple of weeks, APC, which is the Association for Progressive Communications, reached out to me, and they were like, hey, we run this sister website called Gender IT. Would you like to write about your experiences? Would you like to write about community standards? And so I wrote them up a bit that was just very blunt, very conversational, talking about how for as long as I've had unfettered access to the internet, which was about, age 9, 10, there were people sending me creepy things, like even as a baby. And then kind of forgot about it. I did a remote photo shoot with this photographer who I adore, that I had a friend of mine write a bunch of the text that I had gotten on my body. And then he took a photo on an old wet plate camera via Zoom. Had these, crazy photos of like, fuck you, bitch, written across my boobs and across my back. It was really, really empowering. I posted them up on Twitter, and they ended up getting retweeted by a couple of really big authors over in the UK who are very much about mental health, body positivity. And it kind of just exploded overnight. It was very weird to watch because I never had my notifications on my social media. So I opened my Twitter, and suddenly I have like hundreds of notifications. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, no one cares about me on Twitter. What is this? And that just kind of one thing led to another. The World Wide Web Foundation ended up picking it up, ended up talking about my activism and beginning to actually look into why platforms weren't being moderated. And that eventually led to World Wide Web Foundation and APC collaborating and creating this document that was submitted to the United Nations on online gendered abuse.
Whoa.
So that was presented to the UN in July of 2020, if I remember correctly, which was, again, very surreal for me because I didn't have a direct hand in that. I was just being told that suddenly people at the United Nations were reading stuff that I had written and talking about me. And unfortunately, having to write out community standards felt like a 14-year-old boy, which I still find really funny. I had a very immature moment being like, amazing. That is my legacy that I leave. Like, you have to spell cum so many times. I'm so sorry, guys.
At the UN.
Yes. Yeah. That's like my icebreaker now. Like, you might have done amazing things, but I made the UN say cum repeatedly. But no, it's really brilliant. And then I worked with Anastasia Powell, who's this researcher over in Australia. And we ended up working with Palgrave and Springer Nature to create this gigantic, like, monster of a textbook called the Palgrave Handbook for gendered violence and technology.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Gendered violence. Because I wanted to ask you what gendered violence and technology. That's a weird combination.
The entire textbook is looking at both firsthand experiences of activists and philosophers across the board, looking at how technology specifically is being used as a tool to facilitate gendered violence. So it's not necessarily all online. The research I put forward was entirely online and is looking predominantly at how online abuse, such as what Instagram and Facebook and Twitter are often saying, aren't that bad, of fuck you, bitch, go die, all of that stuff. How that can then manifest into real world violence. So looking at Elliot Rodger, for example, who's probably the most infamous of the proclaimed incel killers, who in 2014 in Isla Vista ended up going and trying to murder a bunch of women at a sorority because he was mad that he couldn't get laid. But just going through and looking at these essentially mass murders or attempted mass murders, all linked back to gender, and then looking at how that's been influenced online, and looking at Reddit, looking at 4chan, looking at all of these different websites with these underbellies. Like, they themselves aren't necessarily bad. YouTube, for example, their algorithm has been proven and has yet to be changed to basically, YouTube makes more money the longer you stare at videos. And so if you're logged into your account, it's going to start recommending more and more hateful content. Essentially, they're going to try to get you pissed off or try to get you involved in some way. That way you keep watching. And so we've been seeing an increase of indoctrination on websites like YouTube, like Instagram, like Facebook, like Twitter, that are basically putting women at the forefront of why we should be angry. So if you can't get laid, if you don't have a job, it's women, it's immigrants, it's people of color, just finding marginalized groups and using them as...
We did this before with the Jews.
Even though
that's true.
Yeah, even though it doesn't, the incels predominantly turn to women as their target. It's a brilliant book in general. There's so many good resources in it. A lot of it pulls a lot from, at least my chapter pulled a lot from Laura Bates' research and activism. She's a brilliant feminist over here in the UK. She wrote this incredible book called Men Who Hate Women, which is as awful to read as it sounds, but very important reading.
It's terrible.
It's awful. It took me about 2 months to read that book because I kept getting so incensed. And that was around the time that my housemate was an angel and told me I needed to just take a break because I was heavy in research and writing for this book. And so all I was doing was consuming literature about gendered violence, online violence, and then watching incel documentary after incel documentary.
Oh.
And it got to the point where I was told I was only allowed to watch one incel documentary a day. If I went over that, I became unbearable to be around because I was just so angry. Just
being immersed in that negativity.
Yeah.
Did that change your life outlook besides just being in a bad mood? I mean, like when you see dudes walking down the street now, are you like, bastard? Or
no, not at all. I think there's a lot of there's definitely a subset of people, I won't just say women, but I think if you're put in any situation where you are dealing with a group that is violent, and it gets quite difficult when you're looking at the gender binary, especially because it is predominantly cisgendered men who commit these acts of violence against women and trans women, non-binary people, the whole kind of rainbow of gender spectrum that you want to look at. And I think it's very easy to get very angry and say, all men are doing this, which isn't true, but I empathize where it's coming from. And it's the same with, I think, white people, with straight people, with any group in a majority looking at an oppressed minority who's in pain. It's really important to remember that it isn't about you, and that if you've never treated a woman like that, she's not talking about you. And I love my dad to bits. Like, some of my best friends are cis straight men, and I fucking love them. I would fall on a spike for them. They encompass so much of my world, and I love them dearly. But also, I think I've been able to keep them in my life and keep them as close to me because they do understand, or even if they don't understand, they try and they empathize with what women are dealing with.
I hear what you're saying, that it's not all straight men. But
yes.
I feel like we should just hit Aaron and just have him pass that along to the other guys he sees on this. Just not you,
yes.
but please pass that along on behalf of the rest of us. Yeah.
There's a great Facebook group that I joined that's called Not All Men, but Definitely This One. I'm talking about online gendered violence of like, no, it's not all men. Please stop saying it's not all men. But this dude, it is this dude because he just sent his dick to like 10 women. The knee-jerk reaction to be like, well, I'm good. Like, I'm a really good man. And you are telling me that 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted and raped. But I'm not a rapist, so that can't be right, rather than looking at it and going, but it is 1 in 4, which means you're not a rapist, but you probably know one. And what can we do to then kind of reframe that and go, well, it's not any of my boys, and then take a step back and be like, well, it might be.
It is, in fact, some of your boys. Yeah.
With circus and with modeling and with activism, what's one of the weirdest things that has happened to you?
The UN.
I was going to say, making the UN say come is
definitely like the weirdest, like magical thing for me. Definitely one of them, which like I just found more funny than weird. My duo partner Tash, we were working with this brilliant sculptor, David Williams Ellis. He's absolutely phenomenal. And the project, he will eventually sculpt the two of us, and we will be body painted as sculptures and doing an aerial routine coming to life, essentially. And so we were up in his studio rehearsing an act, trying to get immersed like around the sculptures, taking inspiration from them, getting up in the air, trying to embody them. And David's wife's son, so David's stepson, is married to Princess Beatrice. There's a lot of connection there.
I didn't see that coming.
I did not.
No surprise plot twist.
It's one of those weird things. If you work long enough in the arts in Britain, and if you get high enough, you will start like having very weird associations with the royal family because they have a lot of money and they are.
Meghan Markle was a student of mine.
Yeah.
At Northwestern.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
it does.
I didn't know that either until the press called me and asked me like if I had any dirty secrets. I was like, I don't remember.
You need to make something. I mean, you need to stop saying you don't remember her and actually start making stuff up.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, so we're rehearsing. It's December 2020. This is like a week where we stopped being in lockdown. So we've been rehearsing. It's freaking cold. We have all the doors open, trying to make it as COVID friendly as possible. And David comes up and he's like, oh, there's some people here. They would really like to see what you're working on. Are you cool with that? And, my housemate, she's going through cancer treatment. Like, I'm very aware of trying to be like as safe and protect her as possible because I'm going home later that day. And I was like, yeah, I guess. But I was like, they have to stand outside. Like, I know it's cold, but they can't come in near us. And I was like, I'm going to mask up and they just have to stay very far away from us. And little did I know that within that entourage was Princess Beatrice and Ellie Goulding.
So you made
and watched us.
You made members of the royal family stand out in the cold and watch you.
Yeah, I made a princess and a pop star stand out in the cold. Did not let them come in. She's like, what?
Was she wearing a hat? Was she wearing a hat?
Oh yeah, tell me she was wearing a hat.
She was wearing a hat. What I really loved, so Tash and I got briefed on who they were, and they're just like, be cool. And we're like, that's fine. And at the time, Tash did a 10-minute solo that she had learned that day. So about 6 minutes on a hoop and 4 or 5 minutes of hand balance contortion nonstop because she's a rock star. And came down and they gave like a very polite applause. And she did a little bow and we kicked them out. Afterward, Tash was like, they're a very sour bunch, aren't they? And I was like, Tash, you got the briefing. You know who these people are. And she's like, well, yeah, but if I was a princess, I would be so much happier.
That's a fair point.
It's the hats. Yeah. It's the putting on the hats and you're like, oh.
Yeah, it just hardens your face.
Yeah.
But I do find it's quite funny because Tash as well, like we both lead these objectively really extraordinary lives like that. Even for us, you're like, oh, that's weird. And then we told people and they were like, what the fuck? You just did a private performance for a princess in the middle of a lockdown and you guys are almost annoyed by it. And we were like, kind of.
That's funny.
I have quite a few really dear friends who lead like very quote unquote normal lives. Like they've, gotten married. A lot of them have children. A lot of them have very corporate 9-to-5 jobs. A lot of them have bought houses and are, staying in a country for longer than a month. Weird concept for me. But I look at them and I'm like, you guys are fucking weird. Like, how are you living? What is your life? I'm quite intrigued by it. I'm like, tell me about it. Like, what is it like being a mother? Like, I don't know.
You're so immersed in it, you don't know.
Yeah, it's just very like, it's just work. Like I was talking to my mom. I have a callback for a gig in Bulgaria that if I get it, I'd be there for a week. And I was complaining about it to her, and she brought me back down to earth because I was just like, oh, I'm so tired, and the idea of having to like go through COVID procedures and travel and be in Bulgaria for a week. And she was like, can you shut up? Like, if you get to go to Bulgaria for a week, can you be grateful? And I was like, okay. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Thank you for putting me in my place.
So I need to ask you where you're from.
All over, kind of.
But you said you were from a small town in Virginia. Where are you from?
From Tasley, which is in Accomack County, which is always left off the map.
Tara's from Whitestone.
I'm from Whitestone on the other side of the bay on the northern neck. And I often tell people when people are telling about like their exciting lives and stuff, they're like, what about you? And I'm like, I'm from Whitestone. But but you're from the Eastern Shore. Now you're in London, like performing for like Princess Hat. Yeah.
Princess Beatrice.
Yeah. I'm going to call her Princess Hat. Yeah.
Well, so here's the last question. It's the same question. It's phrased two different ways. So if you could go back in time to when you were at VCU, what advice would you give your younger self? Or same question phrased a different way. If there's somebody out there who's listening to this right now who is thinking about taking a leap, right? They're from a small town in Virginia and they're thinking about, they don't want to live that life. They'd like to, I don't know, run away and join the circus. What advice would you give them?
So
put your nipples on everything.
Yeah, pretty much. This is kind of an oxymoron because I would say train harder, but don't take it so seriously. I look back at my time at VCU, and of course, in hindsight, I'm always like, oh, I should have gone to the gym more. I should have like run that monologue more. I should have done this and that. But I also, in that time, and it's so easy when you're young, when you're in drama school, that's your entire life. Like you're so keen and desperate and hormonal, to look back and remember like that this is not the rest of your life. This is the next 4 years of your life. Have fun, make good connections, put in the work and learn a couple of things if you're lucky, but life does not end there. And whenever you take a gig or a contract, that is not your life. Even if that contract goes on for 10 years, it's not your life. It's still work at the end of the day. So even if you love it, and I love especially circus more than anything in the world. Like to the point where like I'm very obnoxious when I'm around non-circus people because I'll talk about it nonstop about how it's the best thing ever.
I'm just saying that when you're around non-circus people, that's like most people.
Yeah. Very true. But even with that, I think it's so important to not derive your self-worth from the work you do, especially if you're an artist, because that then becomes very conflated and confusing to navigate. And it took me a really, really, really long time to realize that my worth as a human being has absolutely fuck all to do with what I do on stage, do with what I write, with how many things I get published, where I am in the world. Like that literally has nothing to do with it. And I really wish I could have learned that when I was younger. I'm now finding that like the really important things in my life, like none of my career matters. It's just like, do I get to see my when do I get to see my family next? When can I, take an evening off and go get dinner with a friend? Like when can I do these things? I adopted a dog and now I'm like, when can I spend time with my dog like an absolute child? A really good friend of mine has put up a sign when we do flying trapeze in our little like equipment shed that says flying trapeze does not determine your self-worth. And it was put up there because of me, because of how many times I would come down and cry if something wasn't perfect, or if I would look at a video and like I saw a micro bend in my knee, or if I like got a little floppy and I'd come down and I'd be like, well, I'm terrible at this. I don't understand why I'm doing it. Like I'm wasting my life. And which like was my attitude in drama school as well. Like if I did a monologue and wasn't told it was perfect, it was like, well, I'm terrible then. Like I'm the worst person to have ever lived. Surprisingly dramatic for an actor. I think it's just really important to be reminded of that, because I know a ton of artists who are really talented and don't have careers because they're so fucking crippled by anxiety of the idea of putting something out there and failing, or putting something out there and someone thinking less of them or thinking that they're not perfect and wonderful. And I think it's just really important to remember that doesn't matter and you're going to make mistakes. Clowning for me was one of the most freeing things that I was ever introduced to, because clowning is all about failure. And it really forced me to understand that as a human, I'm fallible and that I'm going to fail a lot in my career and as a friend and as a human, and that's okay because that's how we learn. But that's
I'll tell Drew that he will appreciate hearing that.
Oh, I tell Drew so many times like how much he fixed my life. I've drunk texted Drew a few times post university, being like, "You're great, I love you."
Morgan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, keep doing amazing things.
I will try.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Visit reinventionpodcast.com for transcripts and other free resources.